as Elizabeth Taylor and her sixth husband of 7 marriages were having such a good time in Israel that they extended the visit until Saturday, did some sightseeing, and met with Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin.
In Israel, we had sent our cameras to the home of this marvelous woman. Ladies and gentlemen, the former Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Golda Meir.
I had a cocktail party.
A Kabbalah cocktail party?
Kabbalah.
Kabbalah, sorry.
Yeah, well, Kabbalah if you're Israeli, I guess.
Now, how did you become involved in this?
A girlfriend of mine, she kept telling me about this really charismatic rabbi named Eitan who told these great stories, and and I said, Susan, I'm not even Jewish. Why are you telling me these things?
And I guess from a Palestinian perspective, say, why are we shown as the rape? If you ask the UN, they have ample evidence of Palestinians and Lebanese being raped, sodomized by Israeli jailers. Mm-hmm. Why the Palestinian was presented as the rape? Is it more palatable to see a Palestinian raping than an Israeli?
Hardcore jihadis right here in Germany. They're a threat to both countries.
Some Hebrew slang. This is a great one. This means you're living in a movie.
Afa alaich, or afa alecha, which means in English, flying on you. And basically, when you say afa alaich, it means that I love you so much. אני עפה עלייך, so אני עפה עליכם.
From the second Israel was created, Israeli government officials and those sympathetic with the new state immediately set about looking for ways to depict the new state, Israel, in a way that would resonate with Western audiences.
An epic of our time, The Birth of a Nation, with Paul Newman as Ari Ben-Canaan, Eva Marie Saint as Kitty Fremont.
To depict Israel as a liberal democracy that's under attack from its neighboring savages.
Time magazine says, a terrific show.
You heard what I said! Fight! Not beg! Fight!
And what better tool to project that image other than Hollywood, the entertainment capital of the world? Because when you watch entertainment, you're not on high alert. You're relaxed, you're enjoying. So you don't realize you're being spoon-fed propaganda the way you would when you're watching the news. And this usage of Hollywood to hide the propaganda behind fairy tales about Israel started in 1948, when Israel was created. The creation of Israel was celebrated by 24,000 people gathered at the Hollywood Bowl to salute the new state of Israel. They listened to a recorded message from the then Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, as a huge flag emblazoned with the Star of David shone down on them. And over the course of the next 76 years, until today, a staggering number of Hollywood stars support Israel. And if you analyze the way Hollywood builds Israel up, it's always dependent on putting Palestine down.
What about the civilian casualty rate?
Then don't put your goddamn things in private homes. And then we say get out. Of course, we're going to do it.
The response normally is where are the civilians supposed to go?
I don't care. They started it. You're all insane.
It's like the only way they can praise Israel is by demonizing Palestinians. Like it doesn't exist without having an enemy.
Selena Gomez tweeted a pro-Gaza.
Oh, let's see if she can spell Palestinian.
And that messaging is most effective when it's done subliminally. In movies and TV shows that are not related to war. In comedies and light-hearted stuff. Because again, propaganda works best when you don't suspect that you're being propagandized into doing something or believing something. Take for example those satire mockumentary movies by Sacha Baron Cohen, who by the way is a hardcore Zionist, with strong ties to Israel's national security state. Let's take a look at his movie Bruno.
There was still one shithole left to fix. My plan was to get both sides to sign a peace deal.
Bruno was supposed to be about exploring the world of homophobia. And of course, naturally, Sasha wanted to explore homophobia in the radical Islamic Middle East. Because when you're trying to liberate, that's what they're trying to do.
Hi, I love your hat. It's great.
So naturally, when Sasha was casting characters for his film Bruno, he consulted with his casting director, the CIA. I shit you not. He said this on Letterman.
You know, when we were making this film, we wanted it to be better than Borat, and we thought, what could people see that they'd never seen before on film? And we thought one thing would be a comedian interviewing a terrorist. So we showed the script, you know, the outline of the script to the studio, and they said, oh, this is great, who's going to play the terrorist? And we said, no, we're going to find a real terrorist. Now, it's not that easy to find an actual terrorist. There's no Craigslist in Beirut, for example. So we called up a contact we had at the CIA and said, can you help us? We're looking to find a terrorist.
Bruno has a contact at the CIA.
Bruno doesn't, but I knew somebody who did.
All right.
And the CIA then found him a Palestinian that they labeled as a terrorist to use as a character in his movie about homophobia.
Al-Qaeda Otho 2001.
What I find very interesting is this direct, casual access of a filmmaker to the CIA. Like, can you imagine I call the CIA as a filmmaker wanting them to help me research something? What the fuck? As if the CIA exists to improve storytelling around the world. Yeah, that's why they're doing it. They're consulting with him on character development and pacing and story structure. The fact that you're working with the CIA for your movie... And later on, we're going to talk about how Hollywood promotes the war on behalf of the US security apparatus, the CIA, the Pentagon, and the NSA. But for now, let's get back to this racist masquerading as a comedian.
Can I give you guys a word of advice? Lose the beards, because your King Osama looks like a kind of dirty wizard or a homeless Santa.
شو بالضبط الحكاية الحين؟
By the way, journalist Alan McLeod found out who the CIA agent that helped Sasha find the character, the Palestinian character for his film. And that CIA agent turned whistleblower, his name is John Kiriakou. John then said that eventually Sasha was actually interviewing a Palestinian NGO worker that they claimed is a terrorist.
Within a few hundred yards of Israeli soldiers walks a Palestinian branded a major terrorist by the Bruno film.
We found somebody who actually lived in a town that had a terrorist from a pretty nasty group called the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade.
Ayman Abu Aita not only lives openly, but frequently travels abroad. It took our producer, Samir Bazbaz, 2 phone calls and 10 minutes to find someone the film sets up as a man in hiding. Is your number in the phone book? Your telephone?
Yeah. I thought I needed some security to get to the terrorist. The guy picks this secret location.
This was the location, the Everest Hotel. Ayman Abu Aita is in the Fatah party. The film fails to identify him as a Christian when the character Bruno asks him about the Muslim Osama bin Laden.
And this poor guy lost his job because of the portrayal of him as a monster in the film. And later, by the way, he sued for 9 figures, which they settled out of court with him. And you know when people settle out of court, that means they want... And it's an admittance of guilt. But the most fascinating and twisted part of that story is what didn't make the cut in the film. You know, Sacha Baron Cohen's mockumentary films is where he's playing a character, but none of the people that he's talking to know that it's a character. So it's filmed like a documentary, but he's acting, but everyone else thinks it's real. So in this movie, Bruno, he goes around being his most camp self and kind of like trying to trigger a homophobic reaction out of people. And they filmed in Jerusalem. And John, that ex-CIA agent, said that there was one scene they filmed in Jerusalem where Bruno was acting camp. Now, normally Israel is presented as a gay haven, right? But while filming, Sasha was chased down by a group of homophobic Israelis who wanted to lynch him. And according to the ex-CIA agent, this was the first time that Sasha broke character while filming. He was begging them, talking to them in Hebrew, saying, I'm playing a character, this is not me. And they still wouldn't let him go. They chased him down, he found a shop and he hid in the toilet to avoid being beaten up by these guys. This is Israel, the gay haven. So if Sasha wanted to make a film that explores homophobia, wouldn't this footage be gold? Like it's documentary gold. You got the most homophobic reaction. But that wasn't included in the film because it doesn't fit the narrative that Hollywood tries to paint about Israel. Israel can never be the butt of the joke. It has to be Palestinians.
ويقول ملك أسامة بيشبه صاحب وسخ أو باب المشاهد.
Little background on Sasha. He went to an elite school in the UK, English guy, and idealized Shimon Peres. So when you zoom out and you look at his entire body of work, especially when you see what the writers of his movie Borat and Bruno have been saying about the genocide in Gaza, they're genocidal statements.
No one knows what it is to be a Palestinian. You can't do anything. You can't hijack planes. You can't do suicide bombs. You can't blow up children in cafes.
The theocratic Islamic Republic of Iran
run by insane Islamic fundamentalist lunatics, the Muslim racists and the hard left idiot racists. These pro-Palestine extremist wankers are fucking arrogant, disgusting. And I just want to give a quick message to all the generals in the IDF who was involved in the recent attack on the penises and testicles of Hezbollah.
You know, as that journalist Alan McLeod said, it really feels like these are rich Anglo-Israeli guys making fun of Muslims. By the way, Sasha has been lobbying to ban TikTok. He's calling it the biggest anti-Semitic movement since the Nazis. This got nothing to do with anti-Semitism. This is just about silencing all the voices that are trying to debunk the lies that are spun by the Zionist state with the help of Hollywood. Now you're probably asking yourself, maybe Hollywood just likes to do the right thing.
That's funny. Tell another one.
No, seriously, you might be asking yourself, but what is wrong with Hollywood defending Israel? Like maybe they're doing it because it's the moral thing to do, right? Let me tell you a little bit about the morality of Hollywood, yeah? In 2003, at the Oscars, when Michael Moore won documentary for Bowling for Columbine, and that year America was planning to invade Iraq, and Michael Moore chose to use his acceptance speech by bringing all the other documentary filmmaker nominees in the category and spoke on their behalf when he said, "We are all against this war, this fictitious war."
We live in a time where we have a man sending us to war for fictitious reasons. We are against this war, Mr. Bush. Shame on you, Mr. Bush. Shame on you.
Everyone was booing him. And the people who weren't were just silent, like all the actors sitting in the front, like Nicole Kidman. But what was very interesting, which brings us to the point of the lack of morality in Hollywood, that same awards ceremony, that same Oscars, Roman Polanski won Best Director, and he couldn't attend because he was convicted of raping a 13-year-old. He got a standing ovation from all these clowns in the room.
Goes to Roman Polanski for the pianist.
That's the morality of Hollywood. But it's okay. We can forgive Roman because he won Best Director for a movie about the Holocaust. I'm sure you've heard about the actress Melissa Barrera from Scream, who was fired from the Scream franchise, and Susan Sarandon, who was dropped by her agent for speaking up for Palestine. But there was one agent at one of the top acting agencies in Hollywood, Maha Dakhil, a Palestinian woman, who early on mentioned the word genocide. And she was going to be fired, and then because Tom Cruise actually interfered, she got demoted and basically silenced.
Were you silent or were you silenced?
By the way, it's very ironic that more debate about Israel is allowed within Israel than in Hollywood.
I have an Israeli barber. He does my beard. And while he was cutting my beard, he was asking me about my thoughts on Israel and Palestine. And I noticed that the closer the blade got to my throat, the more I became pro-Israeli. That's how it feels talking about that conflict while wanting to succeed in Hollywood.
By the way, this environment of toxic peer pressure and arm twisting using money and power has always been there in Hollywood. And they always use it to silence any voice that stands up to the war machine, which Israel is a big part of.
Hey everyone, this is Wissam from Gaza. I'm still alive.
Have you heard about the 150 Hollywood celebrities now who signed a letter asking the Emmys to rescind the nomination of Bisan from Gaza, who's never uttered an anti-Jewish statement in her life? All she's doing, she's refusing to leave her land, and all she's trying to do is document the plight of her people.
In November 2023, I was among hundreds of thousands forced to risk our lives by walking south on Salah ad-Din Street.
150 Hollywood stars came together to write a letter to the Emmys asking them to take back her nomination.
Imagine being in the comfort of your home somewhere in LA and signing a petition to essentially say, oh, I don't like that Palestinian being nominated for an Emmy.
They can't bear to hear a Palestinian voice. How dare they, by the way? How vile and disgusting. This young woman just trying to document what's happening in her country. They smear her by calling her anti-Semite. It's also so insulting to anyone's intelligence. As if Palestinians would be completely okay if their land was stolen and they were being oppressed by a group other than Jewish people. Like, oh, you're Christians? That's fine. You can kill us. It's the Jews that we have a problem with. It's so embarrassing when people say things like that. Palestinians are trying to resist oppression. They don't care about the religion of their oppressor. Even one of the Hamas leaders, by the way, once said that if it was a Muslim who was doing this, we'd try to kill him. Like, it doesn't matter, this fictitious game of anti-Semitism. Like, it exists, honey, in Europe and in America, okay? But let's go back to the silencing of pro-Palestinian voices in Hollywood. This goes back decades. In the 70s, by the way. At the 1978 Oscars, actress Vanessa Redgrave won the award for Best Supporting Actress for a movie where she played an anti-Nazi fighter. So far, so good, as the Zionists are concerned. But the previous year, when her film was already out, Vanessa Redgrave sold 2 of her private houses to fund a documentary about the Palestinian cause. She called it The Palestinian. After her Oscar nomination for Julia was announced, far-right radical group Jewish Defense League, which again, by the way, they're always hiding behind the Star of David and Judaism. The Jewish Defense League is a terrorist organization. First of all, they threatened the members of the Academy with repercussions if they voted for Redgrave. Then they put a bounty on Redgrave's head and picketed Oscar night, calling her Arafat's whore, burning her effigy. And a Jewish Defense League member was later convicted of trying to burn down a Los Angeles theater which had been set to screen the Palestinian documentary by Vanessa Redgrave. So then it was a great shock to the Jewish Defense League that the Academy still voted for Redgrave to win the Oscar that year. And this brings us to Vanessa Redgrave's speech, which is played by...
Those who have won the nominations for Outstanding Performance by an Actress in a Supporting Role are... And the winner is Vanessa Redgrave and Julia.
I thank you very, very much for this tribute to my work. 2 out of millions who gave their lives in the fight against fascist and racist Nazi Germany. And I salute you, and I pay tribute to you, and I think you should be very proud that in the last few weeks you've stood firm, and you have refused to be intimidated by the threats of a small bunch of Zionist hoodlums whose behavior is an insult to the stature of Jews all over the world and to their great and heroic record of struggle against fascism and oppression, against those who tried to express in their lives and their work the truth that they believed in. And I pledge to you that I will continue to fight against anti-Semitism and fascism. Thank you.
This video is about Israel's long-standing strategy to use the entertainment capital and to have the entertainment capital on its side as it crafts its image. In other words, this video is about the power of PR. Because Israel has always understood that this war is a PR culture war as much as it is a military one. It's a media war, essentially. And without a sympathetic Western media, Israel wouldn't be able to ethnically cleanse Gaza. It relies on crucial media support for its project. For example, no one is as important for manufacturing consent for Israel's genocide as Rupert Murdoch, who owns media outlets all around the world such as The Sun and The Times in the UK, Wall Street Journal, New York Post and Fox News in the US. Murdoch has extensive personal ties to the Israeli political elite and myriad business connections to the country.
So what I have here is a list that was compiled by Benjamin Netanyahu and his political office. Names with Netanyahu's writing. Now this was published by Y.net and the Israeli newspaper. You have names of individuals that were considered by Netanyahu's political office to be funders of his campaign. But one name here who I think everybody should be interested in is Rupert Murdoch. And he's given the designation of 2.
So this man, whom Netanyahu considers a close ally, owns half the media. And this brings us to my video sponsor, Ground News, this topic of who owns the media. Ground News has an ownership feature that gives you exclusive information on who owns the media you consume. Media ownership is something not usually discussed much in our society, even though it greatly impacts the stories we read. Ground News has researched, analyzed, and hand-coded ownership data for over 2,000 news outlets and counting. And if you have an investigative mind and like to peek behind the curtain and see what's behind the mask, behind the fairy tale, then you've come to the right place. Let's take a closer look at this story, which covers how the United Nations has announced a pause in fighting after a baby contracted the first confirmed polio case in 25 years. On the right, I can see the coverage details and biased distribution of the story. Sources that lean to the left, sources that lean to the right, and sources from the center. We can scroll down and see the factuality and ownership. What's interesting about this story is that 16% of total coverage is from government-funded news outlets that are either independently managed or explicitly used for state-approved media. Basically, we should always keep our eyes open and follow the money as it moves between media conglomerates, governments, and their security apparatus, as major financial interests always influence how media covers the news. And features like this is why I love Ground News. To get full access and explore other analytical tools like exploring media blind spots and seeing your own bias, you can subscribe to Ground News and get 40% discount on the Vantage plan, which is the plan that I use, by going to ground.news/indie or scan the QR code. And before we get back to the video, I want to quickly thank all the people who donated on the last video and the new members. Welcome, guys. And now back to the video. Hollywood has long enjoyed a special relationship with Israel, both on and off the screen. In 1978, there was a variety TV show on ABC, starring more than 30 of the biggest names in Hollywood, sports, and TV. They were celebrating Israel's 30th birthday. The show culminated in Barbra Streisand, the bigger singer at the time, who sang 3 of her biggest hits, and then interviewed live Golda Meir, then Prime Minister of Israel.
It's wonderful to hear your voice. I wish I could see your face.
It was a fantastic piece of TV where Golda Meir was acting like she's all nervous about being in the public eye, and Barbra Streisand was kind of calming her down. Girl, this woman has nerves of steel, this Golda Meir. Golda Meir, who's presented as this kind of Jewish, loving grandmother, mother figure. You know what this woman once said? This is a statement which is typical of Israel. We may be able to forgive Palestinians or the Arabs for killing our children, but we will never forgive them for forcing us to kill their children. The fuck? Nobody forced you. You traveled thousands of miles, came to us, and killed our children, and continue to kill our children. But anyway, let's get back to Golda Meir at that 30th anniversary of Israel, and Barbra Streisand interviewing her. Barbra Streisand was introducing her as this fierce girl boss, kind of. Like Zionists were spinning this identity politics years before anyone else did.
Before it was fashionable for ladies to be in positions of importance and responsibility, there was a woman.
Like, you know how they try to distract from their war crimes by talking about how Middle East doesn't have gay rights or women rights? They were doing it. They're trailblazers. They were doing it in the 70s. And basically Barbra Streisand was, here's a woman who went out and did a thing. You know how Barbra Streisand, she thinks she's sexy, like she does this weird voice. She went out and did a thing.
Went out and did her thing.
What? She actually believes this stuff. Because the support for Israel in Hollywood is not just driven by finance, it's also ideological and financial, of course, and driven by what the market needs. The head of the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles, Jay Sanderson, once said, there is no country that has a stronger relationship with Hollywood than Israel. The development of Israel as a creative source for Hollywood was decades in the making. These efforts helped Tel Aviv become a major incubator of the industry, leading to local Israeli shows being adapted in the US, shows like Homeland.
An American prisoner of war has been turned.
You're suggesting that Abinazir planted intelligence in his own safe house?
This stuff isn't conspiracy theory that I'm digging up from the dark corners of the internet. These people who are saying this, they're pro-Israeli. Like the 2 writers of the book I based my research for this video on, Tony Shaw and Giora Goodman. These 2 people are pro-Israelis. One is an expert in the Hollywood archives, and the other is an expert in the Israeli archives. And this is stuff that they say themselves.
I mean, Hollywood has never done with any other country, and this is what our research found, that no country like Israel has been celebrated that way by Hollywood over the past century or more, and that was just a wonderful find for me.
And I was surprised again and again to find just how much effort had been put in by Israeli government officials, by Israeli IDF officers into bringing over to Israel's cause what is the global entertainment capital.
So basically the Israeli government saw early on the value of using entertainment as a propaganda tool. Let me give you an example. You know about the Entebbe rescue operation in 1976. In 1976, 2 German leftists paired up with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and hijacked an Air France plane with 105 Israeli passengers and directed the plane to Entebbe. in the hope their cause will be supported by the Ugandan leader Idi Amin. The hijacking was meant to force Israelis to negotiate for the release of jailed Palestinians.
Call upon revolutionary movements everywhere
to focus the attention of the world on the Palestinian people's struggle.
Now, Israel is known for its vehement opposition to negotiating with terrorists, otherwise known as Palestinian human beings. But in 1976, Israel surprised everyone by agreeing to negotiate, and then secretly launched a mission to rescue the hostages in what became known as one of the boldest Israeli operations. So, a few films were made about this, including this 2018 version.
We stop for nothing until all the hostages are safe.
As expected, the film frames Israelis as willing to debate, argue, and ask tough questions of themselves, of course, before being forced to choose violence, because that's the only way you can talk with Palestinians. Not really different from today. Hamas has been asking for the release of Palestinian hostages, which are more than 10,000, dying in Israeli jails, being tortured. But Israel doesn't want to release any hostages. And by the way, while we're on the topic of hostages, did you see how the Israeli police trampled over a girl who's a family member of a hostage, Israeli hostage, at a demonstration in Tel Aviv? Zionism doesn't care about anyone. It will crush anyone in its way. But anyway, back to 1976 and the Entebbe operations and vis-a-vis Hollywood, right? When the rescue operation happened in 1976, immediately, according to the book by Tony Shaw and Giora Goodman, more than 20 Hollywood producers reached out to the Israeli government wanting to produce movies about what happened. It was like an auction. And then the Israeli government turned to the most celebrated writer at the time, Ephraim Kishon, to help them select the best company to make the film. And one of those companies was Warner Brothers. Kishon actually explained this in internal documents.
And he says, and he explains, what is the value of having one of Hollywood's biggest action stars at the time? And he's discussing a few names. The person who is sitting at row 40 at the top, the top of the cinema, identifies with a positive figure who is an Israeli hero. That is the true reach of Hollywood and the interest of the Israeli government.
By the way, Tom and Giora's book highlights a very important figure in Hollywood, Arnaud Milchan. Not only is he one of the most successful Hollywood producers in the last 3 decades, producing blockbusters and Oscar-winning films, he also offered a lot of diplomatic and political support to Israel by making his base in Hollywood a place where Israeli foreign ministers and prime ministers can come over. He also happens to be a former Mossad intelligence officer and an arms dealer, and also helped run a PR operation for apartheid South Africa called Operation Hollywood in the 1970s. Side note, Israel was always a big supporter of apartheid South Africa. Birds of a feather. Anyway, this Milchan character would invite Hollywood celebrities always to Israel, like Robert De Niro. And this is very common, by the way. The Israeli government and its allies wisely cultivated influential figures in American life to visit Israel and to finally act as de facto ambassadors for the state. And this started very early on with people like Elizabeth Taylor back in the 50s, when she was at the peak of her career, which is also another very intelligent strategy. And back then, Elizabeth Taylor really identified with the struggle of the Jewish people, which of course, it's a horrible thing what happened during the Holocaust. Too bad nobody told Elizabeth what Israel was actually founded on.
השתוללו בטנטור היה משהו נורא. טנטור היה כפר עשיר, בתים יפים, גרים כמו אירופאים, אתה יודע, וגם אנשים היו לבושות ויפה, וזה באמת היה כפר... אחד אנס שם איזה ילדה בת 16, משהו כזה. אתה מבין? אבל זה מכוער מאוד, היה לנו בחור אחד, הוא נפטר, הוא היה פרא אדם. הוא לקח פשוט מאוד ורצח אותם בתוך המכלאות.
Speaking of using Hollywood stars as ambassadors for Israel, one of the authors of the book, Tony Shaw, the one that I mentioned, Hollywood in Israel, before starting to write this book, he was diving into the Hollywood archives and he found this letter to Gregory Peck, one of the most famous actors at the time between the 40s and the 70s. There was a letter addressed to him from Frank Sinatra.
A letter from Frank Sinatra to Gregory Peck from the mid-70s saying to Peck, hey, I'm going to hire an airliner. This is Frank Sinatra. I'm going to hire an airliner and I want to fill it with people and take them to Israel because I think Israel's a great place. And you're going to meet all the politicians. You're going to meet the prime minister.
Frank Sinatra was a big lover of Israel for some reason. In completely unrelated news, go look up the FBI file on Sinatra and look up his ties to the mob, the mafia. This guy, like the state he supports, was a piece of work.
I did it my way.
Anyway, Israel has been using Hollywood to craft an image of itself as a modern state, fighting savages right from the very beginning.
Life magazine says Otto Preminger's film Exodus goes beyond the book as a tale told in proud passion.
Films like Exodus, based on a novel by Leon Uris, who by the way blankly stated that if he wasn't writing books and films about Israel, he'd prefer to be over there shooting Arabs. In the film Exodus depicted Israel as a glorious frontier outpost populated by brave, handsome, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Americans. And this coincided with Israel taking on a bigger role in regional politics in the 1960s. And that's actually when the tone of Hollywood films about Israel started to change, because before that, in the 50s, Israel was presented as a holy land. And over the years, the image of Israel, with the help of Hollywood, moved from Holy Land to a big ally of America in fighting the Soviets and more recently in fighting the Arab terrorists. The Israeli filmmaker Menachem Golan helped popularize the image of the Arab terrorist and the heroic Israeli intelligence officer to the American public, and continued refining this idea across decades in big blockbuster action films.
American, I want to negotiate. Do you hear me, American?
Loud and clear. America's new heroes, the Delta Force.
You're probably wondering, are a couple of Hollywood films portraying Arabs as terrorists enough to call this propaganda? Perhaps it's important to take a step back and contextualize all of this. Hollywood doesn't just help Israel project an image of itself. It does the same for the United States, and more importantly, it does it for the United States to help project its ideology around the world. Because it's very important to mention here that America doesn't project its dominance only through the military, although it does that through the military with its more than 800 bases around the world, which, by the way, is more than any other nation or empire in the history of the world. And one could argue that one of these bases, and the most important base, is Israel. But anyway, this military dominance doesn't get maintained and normalized through just military power. It's through the soft power, through Hollywood, through culture, through pop culture. There's always a story of why US needs to dominate the world. That's where Hollywood comes in. And all of us around the world are consuming American content. TV shows, movies, books. I mean, it's the reference. And through those movies and TV shows, Hollywood helps promote the war on behalf of the US security apparatus. Did you know that the Pentagon and the CIA have entertainment Hollywood liaisons on their payroll? That's their job. There's Hollywood Pentagon liaison Phil Strug. He had that role for decades. Just go check his IMDb page. Check the list of producer credits that he has. It's astonishing. It's longer than the list of Steven Spielberg. When you're watching big blockbuster movies with soldiers, ships, tanks, these weapons are provided by the US military. And that's not given for free. I'm not going to call up the US military and be like, can I have a couple of ships for my indie movie? No, babe. These things are not given for free. These liaisons, these Hollywood liaisons at the Pentagon and the CIA, they require script approval. They need to read everything. And they insert lines. They help shape the image of the US around the world. I'll give you an example from that movie Transformers. Jon Voight's character, just after the American troops were attacked by a robot, this Pentagon Hollywood liaison, Phil, inserted a line for John's character to say,
"Tell them to turn the ships around, come home, ASAP.
Bring him home. Granting the US military this noble, paternalistic, protective quality.
At 1900 local time yesterday, Soxon Forward Operations Base in Qatar was attacked.
Another example is the movie Charlie Wilson's War. This movie is based on a senator from Texas. It was all about how US funded radical jihadist groups in Afghanistan in the 80s against the Soviets. The original movie ended with a scene in which Charlie heard on 9/11 that a plane went to the Pentagon. And the entire point of that movie was that this was a blowback from Operation Cyclone, which was the code name for the CIA program of arming the Mujahideen. The CIA and the military did not want that, and they completely took out any reference to 9/11 from that movie. Instead, the final scene became receiving the Medal of Freedom and no more mention of 9/11. Because that would have made it an anti-war message. That's why it had to be removed. The whole point is to glorify war. And they made a profile of this man as this great guy when all he was doing is stoking the war in the Middle East. By the way, journalists Tom Secker and Matthew Alford report on this in astonishing findings from trawling through thousands of US military and intelligence documents. These documents for the first time demonstrate that the US government has worked behind the scenes on over 800 major movies and more than 1,000 TV titles. For example, the movie Bruno that I mentioned at the beginning. The CIA and the military were heavily involved in that film. You really have to ask yourself, why is the CIA involved in a movie about homophobia?
Are there any activities you suggest where I'll be surrounded just by straight guys?
Oh my gosh, what's up with the scarf?
There's a scene where Bruno goes to the military base to become a real man.
Candidate, what are you doing? Stand at the position of attention, candidate.
Do it!
Wow. Head and eyes straight forward, candidate.
Do it!
Unlike all of Sasha's stuff, this scene seems so scripted. It's like an ad for the military. The producers of the film actually say that the military didn't know what was going on. And then the crew with Bruno, with Sasha, made their escape. We're supposed to believe that they accessed a US military base. They would have sued them. Like, this is a national security concern. There could be like special tech in the background. Like, this is not like, oh, sorry, you made your escape, now you made a movie. Like, what a joke. It's obvious that they knew that they're all performing. So once again, this stuff is more effective when it slips in comedies, in content that isn't war-related necessarily. And the US military is involved in so many TV shows that have nothing to do with the war. Stuff like The Price is Right and the Ellen DeGeneres Show, where they suggested to have episodes where they give giveaways to soldiers or just have people in uniform sit in the audience. And even if you look at sports, by the way, there's Military Appreciation Day at baseball stadiums. Flag the size of the stadium and everyone stands up in their bleachers and salutes. Then a fighter jet flies over and then magically outside the stadium you'll see military recruiters signing people to join the army. And this is all being subsidized by American people, by their taxes. And this is another similarity between America and Israel, or rather between the American public and the Israeli public. They're both being propagandized into war from cradle to grave. Constantly.
Israel is a microcosm of everything America is. The violence, the racism, the colonization, the brutality, the fraud, the corruption, complete disregard even for your own citizens. Israel's the same way. They don't care about their own people, just like America doesn't care about their own people. Always with the idea that there's an external security threat to your country, which therefore justifies you attacking everyone.
I also think that as a Jewish person, like, I was fed a huge amount of lies about Israel my entire life. You know, they never tell you that. Oh, by the way, there were people there. They make it seem like it was just like they're sitting there. It was like the doors open.
Hours for the taking.
Like, it literally, they forget to include the fact to every young Jewish person, basically.
But the good news, because, I always want to end my videos on a good note, is that this relationship between Israel and Hollywood, there's starting to be some cracks. And actually you can argue that that speech by Vanessa Redgraves in the 70s was the beginning of the crack. And the crack has been growing ever since then, and we cannot lose hope. Because if we are to dismantle this terrorist entity which has hijacked Judaism, as it mercilessly wipes Palestinians off the land it wants to steal, we have to remain hopeful and know that maybe the change is not going to happen in our lifetime. I've just completely accepted now that the change, that this free Palestine that I want to see, I've accepted that it may never happen while I'm still alive. And that actually gives me comfort, because then I don't have to get obsessed about, oh my God, it's so frustrating, when is this going to ever end? No, it may end not when I'm here. But I'm happy to be part of a small seed, and I get this inspiration from watching Palestinians on the ground. Like the other day, this thing popped up somewhere on my feed by Rifat Al-Hariri, the poet, who was killed by Israel.
We know that it's very bleak, it's very dark. There's no way out. If there's no water, there is no way out of Gaza. What should we do? Like, drown? Like, commit mass suicide? Is this what Israel wants? And we're not going to do that. And I was telling some friend the other day that I'm an academic. Probably the toughest thing I have at home is an expo marker. But if the Israelis invade, if they barge at us, charge at us, open door to door to massacre us, I'm going to use that marker, throw it at the Israeli soldiers.
It just broke my heart how it's almost the opposite of Hollywood. It doesn't have this grandness like you're on a stage and receiving Oscars. Like, Palestinians are just trying to have their voice heard by anyone who will listen. Like another guy that I've been following on Instagram, this young guy, he used to do these gardening tutorials and plant trees, and he was killed, 19-year-old boy, Mido, his name.
Let me show you what a day of my tent life looks like. I started the day with a cup of coffee, and then I went to lay down because it was so hot. After a bit, I took my phone and laptop to charge him. This is what they look like. And when I got there, I ordered a lemonade. So refreshing. As I waited for them to charge, I started working on designs for my new secret project. I then got the phone and went to get a haircut. I need one. Tell me how it looks.
Just a few thousand people watches all these Palestinians. It's not as grand as Hollywood, but something about watching them and I think, oh wow, this is going to be appreciated way in the future, not when we're still around. But I'm happy to be a small part of it. And what gives me hope also in Hollywood is that new Hollywood stars, even Jewish Hollywood stars, are starting to challenge that system.
There is a passage in the book that I included in the movie that I was really moved by, how he talks about how the Jews and the Arabs are children of the same abusive father, which is Europe. And, Europe completely persecuted the Jews, of course, and also persecuted the Arabs through colonialism. And rather than acknowledging that they're siblings of the same abusive father, they see the abusive father in the other, that the Jews see the Arabs as the new Nazis, and the Arabs see the Jews as the new colonialists.
Of course, you can't expect her to come out in complete boycott of Israel. That's too much. But we have to take it where we can get it. We have to appreciate the small steps. And again, I say this because if we only want big steps, if we're only thinking short term, we're going to be really frustrated and lose the ability to keep fighting. Because in order to keep fighting, we have to recharge our batteries. And speaking of boycott, what we have to do is BDS. Boycott, divestment, sanctions.
Here's one really simple thing that literally any of us with a mobile phone can do right now to support Palestinians in their hour of need. The No Thanks app gives you the opportunity to scan a product in any supermarket anywhere in the world and see if the manufacturer is connected to this brutal Israeli regime, and then you can boycott. There's also a search option where you can put in any products or manufacturers you're doubtful about.
Like if you scan a can of Coke, it tells you where the money is, to which settlement it's going. And it helps you become more informed. I'm not saying you should stop drinking Coke. I'm not telling you what to do or what not to do. But if you download an app like this, you become informed. And hopefully over time, when you become informed, you can make different decisions. So please download this app, because this BDS, boycott, divestment, sanction, is the biggest challenge to Israel, because it puts pressure economically, culturally, academically, and the way to really pressure Israel through pop culture and academia in the West, because Israel derives its support from the West. Not just financially, it wants to be attached to Western values of democracy, and we have to expose them for exactly what they are: lying, terrorist, colonizing.
Day 30-something of planting every day until this genocide is over. A lot of you ask me why I plant. Planting for me is a form of resistance. I bring life to Earth. They're taking away life, but I'm bringing it to Earth. And I hope that my plants have strong roots to the ground, just like we Palestinians do. Check out my melons. They have flowers now. Look at that. This is my watermelon. Luchia over there. Lima beans. Looking pretty good. And tomato.